All right, it is 5:30, so I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. Welcome everybody to our regular board meeting of Vancouver Public Schools. Before we get started, I just want to share a few reminders. As this is a business meeting, we do expect those in attendance to conduct themselves in a respectful way. Interruptions can make it difficult for us to stay engaged and focus on the business at hand and can be distracting to others. So we would ask that you not interrupt the meeting. But if there is an immediate need that you have, you can quietly move to the back and let one of our staff members know. Also, as a reminder, there is a designated space in the back for any video recording or media. We want our boardroom to be a welcoming, safe space for all and any of our community members and guests. We want anyone who attends our meetings or anyone who addresses the board during the meetings to feel that they can do so, no matter who else is in attendance. That is the reason why we have asked in the past for our audience to remain from clapping, cheering, or commenting while others give public comment, whether you are in support of or against. We recognize that there are diverse beliefs and feelings across our stakeholders in our district, but one thing that we do have in common is that we have a vision for what is best for our children and want to do what's best for them, and we are here today to work towards their future. With that being said, we will get started with our business meeting and items on agenda, starting with our roll call. Director Decker.
Here.
Director Sproul.
Here.
Director Zavala-Ortega.
Here.
And Director Smith.
Here.
And I am also here, so we are all in attendance. The next item on our agenda is our superintendent report. So I am going to turn it over to our superintendent, Dr. Snell.
Thank you, Director Barros. It's nice to see everyone. Welcome back to August. It feels like it's been a while since we've been here, since our last meeting was towards the beginning of July. And really in that meeting, we're still kind of reflecting on the year past. This meeting, we're really focused on the year ahead. So we're glad that you can join us this evening. I have a relatively short presentation for the superintendent's report. So I'll just walk through a few things. I want to talk about the board retreat today, just at a high level, COVID-19 update. And then later in the agenda, we'll be able to hear from some of our CTE leadership about an annual plan that's on the agenda today. So thanks to the board directors for spending the day with us, giving up the entire day to talk about the year ahead, and just at a high level, thinking about the board goals and where you want to spend your time and focus the energy of our time together. And so it's always great to hear from you for our staff, and great appreciation to the leadership team that came and listened and participated in some of the activities today. We also talked a lot about communication and some of the logistics for the year ahead, and just want to compliment our IT team. We, over the last weekend, migrated from one email provider GroupWise into Gmail, and the team did a phenomenal job through the years of keeping GroupWise kind of alive, but it was getting pretty archaic and everybody was trying to piece it together the best they could. And I think we're all really grateful to move to a new system, and also really gracious that we know that not everything is going to work perfectly right initially. And so we're just huge credit to the team that's doing that. And they came in and worked individually with our board today just to make sure that that communication piece isn't a barrier as we move forward this year. So thank you to them. And then finally, we spent some time with a community leader, Rika Strong, and just helping us understand. We spent the entire year last year thinking about a possible equity policy with Janelle and Marilee's leadership, really engaging our community, and then drafting an equity policy and then adopting that in February. And now trying to understand, what does that mean for our district, and how do we make decisions that align with that policy and the procedures? And so really grateful for the conversation about that. It's helpful for us moving forward. I'll pause and see if there's any comments from the board about the activities today, and no pressure if there isn't.
That was a great meeting.
Okay. The update we just received on Friday, the Department of Health updates for COVID prevention protocol and risk management. Largely, they're similar to the landscape that we experienced in June of last year. So there are some requirements in there related to reporting and isolation, and also testing access. There's also recommendations in there for best practice. Jim Gray and the team are reviewing those and will update our staff and engage in Q&A. And then Jessica Roberts, our new communications director, will craft messaging in our back to school so families know what to expect. You know, leaving school in June and then coming back in September, we always, actually August this year, there's always some questions about logistics of the school year, and complicating that over the last couple of years is what do we do with the pandemic and how are we managing that? So the team's going to be working hard on that. But largely, you know, last year at this time, we were talking about masking and things of that nature. It's largely continuing as is from the spring. I think that's good news. I think we're still worried about the impact of staff and students who miss school do that. You know, last year we experienced some significant staff shortages as people were out ill. And so Jeff Fish, our new HR director, I know is aware of those challenges, and we want to make sure that we have the staff ready to support students. And we also know we want to support students who happen to be out for this or any other reason. So lots of work to continue to do on but we're hopeful that that will not be our primary focus as we go through the course of the year, because we've got a lot of other things that we need to work on. I think that is it for me this evening, unless there are any questions. Okay.
All right, and the next item on the agenda, we are moving into audience participation. And so this is the time where we have comments from our community. Our citizen comments time is the time in our meeting where the board and administrative staff like to hear comments from the public. If you wish to address the board and do not have an opportunity to sign up at the start of the meeting, please do so now. There's a sign up list in the back. Because most matters require fact finding and review, the board is not able to respond to any public comments made at this time. Additionally, the state's Open Public Meetings Act restricts deliberations on topics that have not been placed on the publicly noticed agenda in advance. If follow-up action is necessary, the board will ask the superintendent to work with administrative staff to consider the information and respond accordingly. As a regular business meeting, we expect the audience to conduct themselves professionally and courteously. Additionally, speakers are expected to be respectful. The board does ask that personnel complaints be submitted in writing. Disruptive conduct may cause the meeting to be adjourned and audience members to be removed. We ask that you approach the podium and state your name for the record, or we do have some virtual comments, so they will be promoted to panelists. Please state your name and also your affiliation with the district, and then you will have 3 minutes to make your comments. If you hear a chime, please conclude your remarks. If you have materials or additional comments you would like the board to review, please hand them to staff in the back of the boardroom, and this information will be shared with the superintendent and board. We appreciate, listen, and care about the broad range of perspectives in the community, and we thank you for your comments. We are going to start tonight with our virtual public comments. We have 2 people that have signed up for virtual comment. And the first person is Mindy Chumbley. Thank you. And then I'll wait till Mindy gets promoted, and then I want to clarify. Hi, Mindy.
Hi.
So I did just have a clarification question for you, because we have our regular public comments, and then later in the meeting, we are having our public hearing for our budget. And it looked like your topic was specifically about the budget, and there is a time during that public hearing for comments about the budget. Would you like to go now, or would you like to wait until?
This is totally fine. Yeah, this is totally fine. So mostly I wanted to come back. My name is Mindy Chumbley. I'm a parent and have been involved over the last 6 months or so with a group of parents regarding the Highly Capable program. And I mostly wanted to come back just to say that we haven't forgotten, and we still want to be involved in the process this year as program changes are reviewed. As far as the budget's concerned, I just saw that the board, it was on the docket today to approve the budget request for highly capable dollars. And that's fantastic. We obviously want that to happen, but I just wanted a kind of a friendly reminder to everyone that those dollars are supposed to be used for students who are identified as highly capable, or certainly to remove barriers to identify, kids who maybe aren't being identified properly currently because of language or other barriers. But mostly we just wanted to say that we are still here. We're forming a formal advocacy group, which should be filed with the state by the end of the month. And I'm going to be on the board. And so I just hope to see more of you, and we look forward to respectful dialogue with the district.
Thank you. Next on the list for public comment, we have Allison Sundwall. Hi, Allison.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you perfectly. Just state your name and affiliation with the district, and you'll also have 3 minutes.
Awesome. My name is Allison Sundwall, and I am a parent of 2 students in Vancouver Public Schools. And I'm here, just like Mindy, to talk about our highly capable students and the work we've been doing. We're working on forming a Vancouver High Cap Community Association. All our paperwork's ready and getting filed with the state to be an official nonprofit organization with a mission of helping support the unique needs of highly capable students in our district, forming community connections within that educational community and providing resources to help educate on what those students' needs are. I think it's a population of students that's often misunderstood when they are a vulnerable special needs student population. So yeah, we just hope that we can have a positive partnership with the district this year, as we're looking forward to reviewing the programming that's being offered. And that's all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Allison. And that is all for our virtual signups. Do we have any in-person signups? No? All right, so that concludes our portion of public comments. Next on the agenda, we have approval of minutes. These are approving minutes from our July regular board meeting. Do I have a motion?
I'll move.
Do I have a second?
I second. Excuse me.
Okay, any discussion? All right, we will move it to a vote. Director Decker,
Approve.
Director Sproul,
Approve.
Director Zavala,
Approve.
and Director Smith. Approve. All right, and the motion passes. Next on the agenda is our consent agenda. This includes a slate of information for both instructional and administrative support services, as well as fiscal services. And so I am going to ask for a motion.
I move.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion about anything on the consent agenda? All right, we will move to a vote. Director Decker,
Approve.
Director Sproul,
Approve.
Director Zavala,
Approve.
and Director Smith. Approve. All right, and the motion passes. Next on our agenda are regular business items. The first item on our regular business is the recommendation to adopt a resolution about our CTE program.
Thank you, Director Barros. We actually have Director Mark Reeve, who is zooming in from the CTE conference, the state conference right now. And so I'm going to turn it over to Mark, and I'll drive through some of the slides that give you an overview of the annual plan. And then there are some follow-up slides in here too with more detail that is just there for your resource. So Mark, can you hear us okay?
I hear you great. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear
Yes,
you, Mark.
okay. Okay, great, thank you. So Dr. Still, Board of Directors, colleagues, and community members, just like to thank you for the opportunity to give you a brief overview of some of the great works that we're doing with our CTE programs in Vancouver Public Schools. Again, this is just a scratch of the surface. We're going to talk about some highlights. And as Dr. Snell said, I have background information for a deeper dive in slides as we get to them. So I think the first slide, if we can get to it after this next one, is just really basically an overview that I wanted to give you kind of a CTE by the numbers. So currently for the 21, excuse me, for our next school year, we have currently forecasted a total of 7,677 students, and that's almost 6,000 in high school and nearly 2,000 in middle school. And those are duplicated numbers. So some of our students do take more than one CTE class, and that's a total count of all the students currently enrolled for next year for CTE courses. And in order to provide all those, I wanted to give you a glimpse of the number of staff that we support to give these students this great instruction. So you can see we have a total staff of support staff and teachers of 108 in the district, and that's 77 high school instructors and 17 middle school instructors. So that kind of helps give the scope of opportunity and access we have for our students. Next slide, please. And in this, for us and our vision, we've been working on this for the last several years, is we have these, what we call the big six, these pathway categories. And within these pathways, we have specific programs that students work in. And our goal and our work moving forward is that we want every student to have the opportunity to complete a program of study. And by our definition, a program of study is a sequence of 2 or more courses that leads to the opportunity to earn college credit in alignment with a community college and or an industry recognized certificate that can help them with that early employment. So again, that's been our goal. That's something we've moved forward with, and I think we've done a really great job in that. And the next slide kind of helps to illustrate that. So these are just 2 things I wanted to elevate of points of pride. And so as we talked about our vision, this actually happened before these new graduation pathways came out, was the sequence of courses that lead to, and that just happened to be a definition of one of the new CTE graduation pathways. And when I talked about college credit this last year, so the year that we just ended, we've done some tallies with our partners in the community colleges, and we had over 4,000 students earn college credit in one of those CTE pathways, which is pretty remarkable. And in addition to that, of the total graduating seniors, we had over 900 students that met the requirements for a CTE graduation pathway. I will note that students can earn more than one pathway. This is just a snapshot of that CTE pathway. So we're pretty proud of that. And that, 1,400 or more students that graduated, we had 900 that actually took 2 or more courses within a pathway. So that's a point of pride for us. Next slide, please. So this is, again, just kind of a broad brush of some of the things that we're working on and that we're proud of. As part of our requirements for the state of Washington, we have to enter into strategic planning. And it just so happens that we are going to launch into strategic planning side by side with the district. So we're really happy about that. And we're going to try to make sure we leverage the good work and the community outreach that's happening to help inform us and make sure that we are in alignment with programs that allow access to students, that lead to work readiness, or whatever their post-secondary plans might be for that training to take those next steps. So we'll be in that process this year with community partners, as well as our employer partners and our teachers and staff to do that work. So I look forward to sharing that with the board as a deliverable at the end of this year as well. Something we're really excited about is as we are working in our careers and education programs on an initiative to grow our own, we really want our students to get educated and want a desire to become an educator and then come back and be a part of the Vancouver Public Schools. So an exciting thing is we actually applied for and won a competitive grant from the Office of Instruction. And that has allowed us at Fort Vancouver, where we have our Magnet Careers and Ed program, to hire an additional staff and intentional somebody from an underrepresented community to be a part of that. So we're going to have a team teach atmosphere and dollars to help also coordinate and grow that program with the intention to see how can we best serve our students and how can we best reach all the students in our district And that could include maybe expansion to other schools. It could be expansion of community partners to help elevate the programs and create opportunities. And then what's nice too is it kind of ties into a vision that Dr. Snell had that he tasked me with, which was re-engaging graduated students. And we're actually placing them in internships in local elementaries with the intention that not only will they re-engage with the district, but maybe that might light a spark for them to stick with us and become an educator. So we see a progression of offering the education in our programs and then connecting with those students to also keep them engaged once they graduate, to stay connected with our district as they go on a pathway to become an educator and then hopefully come back and teach our students. So that's something too, I'll keep the board apprised of that progress. Something we launched this year too were actually paid internships. We have a program for non-paid internships, but we really believe that we wanted to offer that next step and see if we could access more students and give them the opportunity, instead of volunteering their time, to actually be compensated for their time. So we put out an RFP, a request for proposal, competitive, and Partners in Careers, who's been a longtime good partner for us in workforce development, was awarded the contract. And we've been really successful this year in recruiting students, placing them with employer partners, and having some successful completion of those. So just by the numbers, you can see that this last year we had 72 students actually successfully complete the internship, which is 60 hours or more with their employer. And we plan on doing 20 more again in the fall. So that's something that we want to continue. We are seeking sustainable funding in that. And so we're exploring different options to make sure that's available for our students. One of the things that we continue to look at when we talk about access, and we think this will probably develop through the district strategic plan as well as the CTE strategic planning, is we do have several full day magnets, and we're just looking at the idea of maybe those full days move to half days so that students could maintain their identity in their local school, but still have access to some of our programs that are more equipment intensive, such as our manufacturing program or our culinary arts program, which is already a half day. But we want to make sure that students have access and opportunity and looking at creative. Maybe there's a hybrid option, or maybe some kind of way to tweak these or look at things differently to make sure that students all have access to the program and their passion that's tied to their high school and beyond plan. And then finally, kind of in the showcases, we have worked really hard to increase the exploration capacity in middle school, which we think is important. So students currently have a STEM exploration lab as an elective that they can opt into to get a couple of days in different career fields and kind of give them a try and see if there's a passion or if it lights a fire in them, and then give them some counseling or some advising on as they progress through a magnet program into their feeder high school. Career interest that they have can be accessible on how to find that. But the next step beyond that is most of our middle schools also have sixth graders that do a tech rotation or some kind of introduction to technology. And we've invested some funds to create introductory labs too. So now this next year, we're going to launch these STEM activity labs, which is really hands-on activities in 8 or 9 different career fields that they can look at, they can create, they can explore, they can do that hands-on work. And then maybe that might influence them to take the elective in the 7th and 8th grade year around those and do some deeper dives as they look at those career paths. Because we do believe too that all students could benefit from a CTE course and that career exploration, no matter where they go on their post-secondary plans. Next slide, please. And of course, we can't do this alone. CTE just can't make these placements. We can't bring the relevance into the classrooms unless we have employer partners. And I just wanted to throw this slide up there, and it's a busy slide, but it's just a snapshot. We have over 1,000 active partners that work with us. And that's whether they're being a mentor in a school, they're doing classroom presentations, they're hosting students for internships, they're on our advisory boards. We have a great community that really supports these programs. They want to do their part. So we welcome them. We try to streamline it and make it as easy as possible for them to come in and help support our teachers and our students to get that relevant experience to help them explore pathways as they move on beyond us into their next plans and next steps. Next slide, please. So this is kind of a recap of what we do. The annual requirement, one of the reasons that I'm here, I love the opportunity to be able to speak to you and break some things up, but there is an annual requirement that all of our programs do a quality evaluation. So there are actually 14 criteria for a quality program. And every year we have our teachers in the programs do a self-evaluation. We compile those numbers, we review those with local advisories, so our employer partners, and we look at areas of growth or opportunities. And we do that annually. So now that also is shared with the board. I have a more detailed document in one of the background slides, but this year we have identified areas as a district that we want to lean into is around student leadership, which is really looking at different student leadership organizations and which might be best to service our kids to give them opportunities to expand that piece. And every year we're looking at articulation, which is the college credit tie, as well as equivalency credit. So we want to make sure that if it's possible, we can offer CTE courses that are also offering enough academic standards to meet an equivalence for a basic standard so that they can navigate the 24 credits and meet some of those other requirements in our courses. And then also industry certifications. We want to make sure that our programs, if we can't offer them in the school, which is what we want, that we give them opportunity outside of school to earn those certificates. And I think that's my last slide, Dr. Snell. And again, the rest are background slides. I'm happy to answer questions or talk more if you'd like me to.
Mark, thank you so much. We'll just open it up to any questions from the board.
I just want to say that, Mark, I remember meeting you when I first came on board, and your excitement and enthusiasm for CTE was just palatable then. And I can see why this program has grown just in the last 3 and 4 years to be one that other school districts can look to. You've done a great job, and I'm excited to see the future for our kids.
Well, thank you very much.
I just want to say thank you for the update. I think the addition of the transition of Vancouver Public School graduates into an educator kind of pathway is really exciting. It's an exciting change.
If there are no other questions, the recommendation is then to adopt Resolution 891, approving the Vancouver Public Schools Career and Technical Education District Plan for the 2022-23 school year. Do I have a motion?
I'll move.
And a second? I'll second. Any further questions or comments? I know Mark did a great job kind of giving us background information. Anything else? All right, well, we will then put it to a vote. Director Decker,
Approve.
Director Sproul,
Approve.
Director Zavala Ortega,
Approve.
and Director Smith. Approve. And I also vote to approve, so the motion passes. Next on our agenda, we have an item to the recommendation to increase nutritional services meal prices for the 2022-23 school year.
Yeah, and actually a pretty cool opportunity that staff have pursued for some time that I'm going to ask Brett to communicate with the board with this item.
All right, thank you, Dr. Snell and President Barros. Yeah, the action item before you would do 2 things. Most significantly, it would reduce the paid price for what was previously paid meals within all of our schools, K-12. And that is allowed because of a new funding stream from the state, which matches previously existing federal funds that fully replace that revenue that we would have collected from local families. So again, the action item is to reduce student prices to 0. But then as an offshoot of that program, we do have to take a look at the adult prices that are still going to be charged. And so we're recommending a $1.60 price increase to be in compliance with the relationship of adult prices in that program. I should also note, I think it's been, our review revealed it's been 10 years since we've increased the adult prices. So the $1.60 seems a lot, but there's a little bit of pent up inflation there too.
Hey, Brett, could you tell us just a little about what's happened the last couple years with meals and why this is significant from going back pre-pandemic?
Sure. So at the onset of the pandemic, there was a special consideration by USDA to provide meals on a all 100% eligibility basis. And again, just because it was impractical to process paperwork and determine who was eligible and not. When, if you think back to the beginning, we were doing curbside grab and goes. The federal government was able to extend that 100% eligibility. So in other words, free lunches for all through last year. But this year we would have normally had to resume charging for lunches for those families that haven't fully qualified for the free or reduced program. With this community eligibility program, we will be able to, in essence, continue at that free for all students practice.
Thank you, Brett. Any questions from board directors about this?
All right, so the recommendation is then to increase the nutrition meal prices for 22-23 school year. Do I have a motion?
I motion.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Do we have any further questions or comments? I appreciate the additional explanation because I know the recommendation is to increase, but again, that's for the adults, and I'm excited for the fact that we can offer free meals to all of our students. I think that's really exciting. So any further questions or comments? All right, well, we will put it to a vote. Director Decker,
Approve.
Director Sproul,
Approve.
Director Zavala,
Approve.
and Director Smith. Approve. And I also vote to approve, so the motion passes. At this point in time, we are going to recess our regular board meeting for the purpose of holding a public hearing. So we are now in recess. So we are now going to have a public hearing regarding our annual budget. And so I am going to request that Brett Butchwick come forward to make a presentation about the budget.
Thank you very much, President Barros. So yeah, as we do every year, I'll share a few slides that will highlight some of the budget deviations. So Dr. Snell, if
Brett, where were those slides? Where would I find those slides?
I'm sorry, they're on the I think I shared them with you. They're called the I think 2022-23.
The same ones that we
Yeah.
briefed the board
Yep.
with last week.
Yep,
Okay.
absolutely.
You're gonna have to talk just a minute while I pull those up.
All right, so yes, so the budget is actually, you'll see on the first slide is multiple funds. We'll do a quick preview of the other funds, but the vast majority of our management operations and those key operational decisions reside in our general fund. So most of the slides you'll see are relating to the general fund, but I just don't want to forget the fact that it is a budget of all the different funds. And yes, so with that, we can dive right into the next slide, please. And this just really quickly highlights what I was just describing. The general fund, as you can see, both on a revenue and expenditure basis, is by far our largest fund. And we will talk considerably about the trends and dynamics within that fund's budget. But before we pivot into that detail, I'll just highlight real quickly, Transportation Vehicle Fund. The sole purpose of the Transportation Vehicle Fund is to buy buses. So not necessarily operate buses. So driver salaries, mechanics, fuel, that happens in the general fund, but the actual acquisition of the buses happens in the Transportation Vehicle Fund. You might notice that that expenditure figure is a little higher than it's been in the past. What we want to do is we want to be in position if the federal funding for electric buses improves to the point where we can apply and possibly transition some more of our fleet. We've already have 3 electric buses. We want to be in a position where we can quickly make that application and procure those buses. If we don't get that, then certainly the money won't be spent at that level. Capital Projects Fund, I think you're familiar with, is where the significant improvements to our facilities occurs. Again, these funds are siloed, so they really can't transition between the other two without formal action and limited ability to transfer. That fund has seen a lot more activity in the last few years since the passage of our 2017 bond. This particular budget is optimistically presuming that we can wrap up those projects this year. So you'll see the ending fund balance is very low. That's kind of the worst case scenario to wrap up all of the budget, or excuse me, all of the bond projects. But likely we'll have a little bit left there and possibly some projects that are still straggling a little bit at the end of this year. Debt service fund, just real quickly, that is a fund dedicated solely to collecting taxes to service the debt on that bond. And I think there might be one or two other previous bonds that are still being paid. Again, voters approved that taxation for that specific purpose. So that's just the revenue and expenditure to service that approved debt. And then lastly, Associated Student Body, or ASB as it's commonly known. That is the students fund that all of their activities are collected and accounted for there. They have a level of governance responsibility for the expenditures and revenues. So what you see there, even though you'll be asked to ultimately approve it, it has been already approved by the local student bodies. So with that, we'll transition into more of the deep dive on the general fund. The first thing we look at in our budget cycle is the enrollment. That is a primary driver of our state revenue, which you'll see in a minute is the most significant category of revenue. We've had an interesting ride as it relates to enrollment, as you all know. But just to anchor where we're at, we had seen modest declines year over year, primarily because of our incoming kindergarten cohorts had been lower than traditional incoming classes over the last 4 or 5 years. Then we see in 2020-21 the impact of the pandemic and migration to other programs. We anticipated a more optimistic rebound in that budget column of the 21,775. We actually fell a little short of that by the time the actual 21-22 count was finalized. But it was a modest increase over the 2021. But what I would anchor is there was a return of certain students that were sitting out during the COVID for whatever reason, the heat of the COVID pandemic. And that somewhat masks the drop in kindergarten enrollment and the, kind of the matriculation of those lower classes through the elementary schools. So now we would like to think that there will be even more students returning and higher kindergarten cohorts, but our analysis suggests that we might see continued drop down to 20,755 in 22-23 budget that you're being asked to consider. Obviously, we'll continue to brief you on those numbers as we get the actual counts in the fall. And then also, as we talked about at the retreat, we are going to engage a long-term demographer to help us with the kind of the long-term trends that we might consider not only at the school level, but in the overall district level. One of the things that really one of the primary metrics of a budget is to kind of look at the relationship between revenue and expenditures. And the way that we typically communicate around that is our fund balance, which is really our cash reserves or ending equity, to compare it to a private industry financial model. You can see that our beginning fund balance is forecasted to be just under 37.5 million. That's pretty high, as we've talked about. It's well above the board targets, which are delineated in the footnotes down below. With the demands of our students and our declining enrollment, there is a pressure to consume some of those resources in the budget that you're considering. And so the forecasted ending fund balance of 27.8 million roughly equates to about 6.7% of expenditures. So that's still within the target range of your, again, it's a policy that speaks to target, not a hard and fast threshold. But the undesignated or unassigned portion is still slightly below the target of 3%, coming in at just under 2% at that point. We'll talk a little bit about fund balance when we get into the 4-year budget outlook. But for now, I guess the message is we are lucky to be in a position to have robust resources because we know our students and staff need it more now than ever, certainly in my career. And so this budget does presume to invest some of those resources into those needs. So if we can transition. So the next series of slides looks at our revenue and expenditure through the lens of certain categorical groupings. But really what we're looking at here is the last 3 budgets. So trying to kind of understand some trends that are occurring over the last 3 years. And again, just to anchor, it's budget to budget to budget. It's not introducing actuals because certainly the budget represents a series of budgets, or excuse me, values and policies that we want to make sure that we're comparing those actual points in time. What we see here on this revenue slide is the biggest, I guess, couple trends that I would highlight are obviously the state general purpose, which is that basic ed or apportionment funding. And predictably, as we've lost student enrollment, we're seeing a decline in that category of revenue. Thankfully, for the last 3 years, really, and more dramatically, the last 2 budgets, if you look at the federal special purpose, it has increased dramatically. I know we've used the term ESSER frequently, but again, just to anchor that, ESSER is the federal stimulus dollars that we've been able to utilize over the last 3 years. Unfortunately, 2022-23, or this budget, will be the last year that we'll have those funds available to us. But they've certainly helped to offset some of those lost state revenues and allowed us to maintain the fund balance that I spoke to on the previous slide. With that, we can move on.
Right, I just want to also
Oh, yeah.
highlight that those are stimulus funds, but they're specifically designed to meet student needs as a result of the pandemic. So I just want to highlight that I think that's an important thing that the board has asked us to make sure that we push those funds towards the impact that students and families have felt. And so those funds have been spent accordingly. And then we have to figure out what we want to do with those moving forward. If the revenue stream isn't picked up at the state level, then we've got a little bit of a cliff that we're heading for with that. So thanks, Brett.
Yep, thank you for anchoring that for sure. So the next series of slides will move into the expenditure analysis, again, through that similar frame of the last 3 budgets. The first one is by what we call program groups. And so these are kind of the first slice of our expenditures into those basic ed, special education, and then we get into the support services kind of spectrum here. The couple things that I would note here is basic education continues to increase. Some of that has to do with inflationary adjustments. We're in obviously an extraordinary period of time in terms of inflation. And so our wages and some of our non-employee related costs are going up, which compensates for some of the scale back due to enrollment that's occurred. We see that in special ed as well, although there's also some service delivery pressures that we're feeling in special ed that have called additional expenditures into that area, specifically the area of occupational therapists and some other auxiliary services. And then support services, which again tends to be kind of those district-wide, less student impact, although that we all appreciate the impact that those services do have on students, has been pretty flat throughout that period of time. So when we move on to the next group of expenditures, and again, this is the same expenditures, just sliced differently. This slices by what the state calls the activity groups. So you can see teaching support. There we see a slight decline in teaching. And again, we can anchor that to the decreased enrollment, less classrooms, less teachers. But we have seen increases, even though our student populations have decreased. We have seen increased investments in teaching support and other support services. In teaching support, I think the primary driver of that increase is counselors is included in that. Some other things that are in that category are teacher librarians, those sorts of school-based, but not necessarily teaching functions. Professional development is also in there. And again, since this is sliced by activity, not necessarily program, we do see more ESSER funds in this category because of those exceptional supports that ESSER is calling on us to make. And then other support services, the primary drivers for that increase in this budget year are the Network upgrade that we're using ESSER dollars to pay for would fall into this other support services. And then we're also making some HVAC improvements out of the ESSER funds that fall into this category. And you can see the last two, building administration's been relatively flat, and central administration is fractionally decreased each of those 3 years. The last expenditure slide that we'll go through is by, again, a term that the state accounting manual uses, object code, which is just, again, those classifications of salaries, or is it supplies? I apologize that the columns aren't broke consistently, but hopefully you can read that. And again, I don't know that there's a great amount of ahas here. The one that might create a question is the supplies and materials in that middle year as to why did it spike and then did it go back down? And the practical reality there is, as we budgeted ESSER last year, we hadn't made the final distributions and determinations. And so it was a large bucket of ESSER dollars was budgeted as a supply, which was really kind of a to be determined as we got further into the plan evolutions and the allocations there. So really pretty stable picture as we look at here. And then I guess the last thing is there that spike in capital equipment. As I mentioned on the last slide, that's the HVAC and network investments that we're making. So now, as we're required by law, we have to crystal ball somehow a 4-year budget. And I see some smiles as I say that, because we've all lived through some pretty significant volatility over the last few years. And really, those of us that have been doing this for a while know that even a 1-year budget is antiquated by the 4th day of school most years, and enrollment has changed. There's some other pressures that call into question, okay, how are we going to recalibrate? So we do have the ability to certainly reshuffle dollars within this budget. And then as we look into the long term, it's certainly constructive to look at kind of what the trend lines and what some of the pressure points might be. But I would certainly contend it's premature for anybody to get too consumed or start developing dramatic reactions to this, knowing that our revenue and in some level our expenditure pressures have changed so dramatically year to year. We will have ample opportunity to assess and recalibrate based on hopefully new revenue, or certainly whether it's new enrollment or additional supports from the state or federal government. And then certainly look at our expenditure sustainability through that lens as we navigate these outgoing years. But with that being said, what I would anchor is this particular forecast anticipates a loss of ESSER funding, likely to continue to modest declines in enrollment, which means that our expenditures, you can see, dropped pretty dramatically in the second year of this 4-year forecast, 23-24, and then modest increases for those outgoing years. Also modest increases in the revenue after it's adjusted for the ESSER loss in 23-24. But then the bottom line is certainly something that we need to have mindfulness of. If not, we don't need to have a plan, or we don't need to react to it, but under this given set of assumptions, and they are just assumptions at this point, we would go perilously low on the fund balance. And so we do have the luxury of time and the fluidity of our funding, but something that we'll continue to be talking about as we navigate this year and certainly start planning for next year and the year after. The last slide is kind of a little bit of a shift, but it's an acknowledgement that we always like to do at this time of year when we're talking about these optimistic plans and the needs and services that our students deserve. We never want it to be lost that Vancouver enjoys tremendous support from our community. And one of the ways that our community supports our kids is the passage of funding measures. And so this particular table of tax rates kind of shows what voters have been asked to support and kind of how the trends are working through the various years there. So The couple things I would anchor is the 2019 tax year was the first kind of post McCleary year. So you would see a pretty significant drop in the cumulative and certainly the education and operations levy that year. As we've kind of navigated that post McCleary landscape and legislation has changed and some pretty difficult decisions across the state were contemplated. You can see that there has been additional relief on that education and operations levy. In Vancouver, it took the form of a supplemental levy that was passed in 2000 for collection in 2021. But nonetheless, our total tax rate is still about 80 cents less than it was in the year before McCleary adjustments. So we've tried to honor that savings, knowing that folks are paying a little more to the state. And certainly there's other pressures out there that we're always mindful of when we ask our community for those funds. I think that's the main high points, unless anybody else has a comment or question. And then I think we can, once we navigate that, we can open it up if there's any last community questions.
Thank you, Brett.
All right.
Next, as part of the public hearing, the members of the audience are given an opportunity for input concerning the budget. Did we have anybody signed up for public comments for the budget? Like Brett is looking, no. Okay. And so now we will close our public hearing and we will reconvene our regular business meeting. And so next on our regular meeting agenda, we will consider the budget. Do I have a motion to adopt the budget?
I'll move.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any further questions or comments? And again, thank you, Brett, for all of that information. I think you have done a great job of informing us kind of along the way, all of the information in advance that you have shared with us on the budget has been appreciated. With that, we will take a vote. Director Decker,
Approve.
Director Sproul,
Approve.
Director Zavala,
Approve.
and Director Smith.
Approve.
And I also vote to approve, so the motion passes. With that, that is the end of our action items. Next, we have Board of Directors report. Are there any items to report? All right, and then I believe we will now adjourn our meeting. So thank you all for attending. Meeting is adjourned.